Hey everybody, Barrows here. Thanks for joining me on this introductory episode of the Jest of It, a new podcast coming out this season. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the format of my podcast by starting off with me sharing one of my own stories. So what's about to happen is I'm going to share a story with you all that I've written, bring myself back in, and actually discuss where I'm at in life, what this podcast is going to look like, what I hope to do with it this season. I'll have numerous guests and they will bring their own stories to the table to share. But I wanted to go ahead and get started right away with one of my stories. So here we go. Puffy Yellow Jackets by Barrows. I remember being in the 7th grade and someone pointing out a Roxy Surfer Girl model in a 17 magazine. A girl in our friend group pointed her out and said, JJ, this looks like you when you get older. The girl she pointed at was a short-haired brunette who was clearly a tomboy. She didn't look like the other models, but she was still a model and she was cute in a tomboy kind of way. It was the first compliment I remember getting as a middle schooler. Like most middle schoolers, I was awkward and underdeveloped, but without the obvious potential that other girls had to be high school heartthrobs. For example, I didn't make the cheerleading team, so I borrowed a cheerleading uniform from a girl who did, and I had my mom take cheerleading photos in our front yard. They were not attractive, and there was a mud pit behind me. I was approached by boys, but only to talk to my friends for them. I never understood why boys didn't like me, but in 7th grade, I got my first compliment regarding my looks, or my potential looks. One day, just maybe one day, way after high school, I might look like a 90s tomboy model. I was excited at the thought and wondered how long I would have to wait. One of the boys who overheard the comment being made about my future self walked over and asked if he could see the picture. Wow, yeah, I could see that, he said, and my excitement grew until he kept talking. If that's true, call me then, but not before. Excitement dwindled and the reality of my present self came crashing down on my 2-minute-long dream of becoming a 90s tomboy model. Everyone laughed. So naturally, I laughed too, because that's what you do when you're in middle school and you don't want to let on that you've been hurt. Except that it's not what you should do. Never on your behalf or the behalf of others should you silence your voice and laugh with the crowd for the sake of fitting in. But in middle school, I didn't understand that. And truth be told, sometimes I still forget because it feels good to fit in, even when it hurts. By the time I reached 9th grade, my 5-year relationship with braces ended. I remember the day I got them off. I couldn't stop licking my teeth. They felt so slimy and perfect. It was the first time something on me ever felt perfect. I went to youth group that night and a boy pointed out that I had gotten my braces off. Everyone was outside scattered on the field in front of the church for a game of dodgeball. Huffing and puffing while trying to dodge a big red rubber ball, a boy ran up to me. You got your braces off, followed by deep breaths. Yeah, I smiled, not moving so as not to mess up my smile or get slime on my mouth. It looks good, he said, followed by the loud smack of being hit in the head with a big red rubber ball. You're out, a kid yelled, and I wanted to attack that kid for interrupting my first compliment from a boy. I said thank you to the boy as he walked off the field. Are you cold? He asked as he started to take off his puffy yellow jacket and walk back towards me. A little bit, I lied. Given the slightest possibility that a boy might offer me his jacket. Yeah. Get off the field! You're out! The kid yelled again at the boy with the puffy yellow jacket who liked my slimy smile. He is, I turned and yelled. He's giving me his jacket. I'm cold! I lied with confidence and a death stare that shut that kid right up. Don't mess with an awkward girl on the outskirts of middle school when she's getting her first compliment from a boy. He handed me his jacket and I took it, still uncertain of why he offered it, but pretty sure it was because of my teeth. I went home that night and wrote a thank you card to my orthodontist. Seriously. I've believed in thank you cards for as long as I can remember. So, once again, thank you, Dr. Ross Orthodontics. I still get compliments on my teeth and I can't exactly take the credit. All of this to say to my present self, because I'm forgetful, and anyone willing to listen, especially in middle and high school, be nice to people. While we all strive so hard to do something great and be somebody worth remembering, sometimes being someone worth remembering is as simple as just being nice. With love as the lenses with which you look through, speak truth over people about who they will become, but also speak truth to them about who they are now. Tell people they don't have to wait to be great one day. Tell them they are great now, growing into someone greater. Life is hard and middle school is harder. High school follows and it doesn't get any easier after that. Kids need to be told they are smart and funny and beautiful and brilliant and fully capable of thinking for themselves and of voicing their truths. Kids grow up. All of them, even the awkward ones. And they remember. They remember who picked on them and they remember who was nice to them. They remember the boy who wanted the girl to call him one day if she grew up pretty. And they remember the boy who risked getting smacked in the head by a big red rubber ball just so he could tell the girl he liked her smile. 9 times out of 10, the girl never calls the first boy. But I guarantee you, no matter how old she gets, she still smiles and licks her slimy teeth whenever she sees puffy yellow jackets. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Jest of It podcast. This is going to be an interesting adventure because for those of you who do know me, you know I'm very visual. I like to create, edit, produce, share videos. I love art. I love creating visual art, sharing color. If you've seen, any of my Instagram feeds, because over the course of Instagram being in existence, I have attempted many of accounts. In fact, whoever can find how many accounts I've created, I will reward you with. Well, let me think about what with. Maybe a Jest of It t-shirt. I don't know if I have justified it being worth it yet. Get it? Okay. Anyways, I think we live in a day and age where social media happens to be the tool in which we use to try various things. Therefore, our efforts are more public than maybe they would have been back in the day when you just got to try things without everyone seeing them. So all of that to say, you'll learn quickly in this podcast that I like to take the scenic route to get to a point, hence the name. The Jest of It, also getting to the gist of it, which I failed to do. So this is my attempt to do so. I use social media, Instagram, whatever it is, to visually enhance the atmosphere, the social media atmosphere, or if that leads itself into you finding more art or more comedy, more books, more whatever it might be, something that adds value and color and kindness and love, at the risk of sounding very cheesy, to this world. So see, I took the scenic route. All of that to say this is going to be an adventure in and of itself because I'm used to creating something visually for people. And so even if I have lacked the words at time to express something, I've always been able to make up for it visually with art, with video clips, whatever it is. And so I really appreciate you joining me on this process. So I wanted to explain a little bit about how this podcast is going to go before we just start unleashing episodes, because in my opinion, I think it's going to be a little different from the format of a standard podcast. I love stories. I love the power of story. I love what a story is meant to do. I love that there's not just one thing it's meant to do. A story can be simply for entertainment, to sit back and relax and just enjoy, to be relieved from the pressures and stresses of life. A story can also be meant to inspire and to motivate and to change your way of thinking or your behavior, just to get you to question why things are the way that they are. And instead of complaining about that, what could be your role in doing something about it? And so I think stories, while they have many different purposes and meanings, whatever it is, they are very powerful. Stories, in my opinion, are going to be what changes the world. And I realize that's a really lofty statement. That's something that people say in speeches to make you feel inspired or hopeful or whatever. But look at the world in which we're in. I mean, I'm sure every generation has said it. And so in that sense, there is hope that we can keep making it regardless of what happens. But is that really why we're here, to just make it through? So there has to be some of us out there who really do believe in this notion of changing the world. That's a really grand statement. I don't think I personally am capable of changing the world. That said, I do think how I act, how I behave, and what I choose to do in the world matters. And in the small steps, in the small environments, in the small encounters I have with people, I think it's those small steps that add to the process that can change the world in a good way, in a positive way. So stories, that's my thing. That's what I'm about. People can call me an artist. People can call me a comedian. People can call me an author, whatever you want to call me. All of it is made up of the same thing, and that's stories. Something that evokes something greater in us. I love it. I can't get enough of it. And while I love sharing my own stories and I wanted a platform to do that, I also want to experience the connectedness of life. And that's not only to listen to other people's stories, but to share them as well, to give them the space to share them. Not everybody has a platform. And I'm not saying I have a huge one. I don't think that I do by any means, but I have enough of a space, enough people to hear someone else's perspective that they can then go out into their groups of people or their friends and their family to share that different perspective and to just get us all to open up a little bit more to seeing the world being so much bigger than what we think it is, and yet so much smaller in the ways in which we're connected. And so all of this grand kind of thinking is really hard to make palpable, right? It's really hard to just package up. And I don't think I can do that by any means. But given that podcast is a medium in which to share and tell stories, that's what I want to do here. So throughout the coming weeks, yes, I'll be sharing some of my stories, some of them even in the book that I recently published, some of them in a book that I hope to publish. But it's not about me, right? The hardest life lesson to learn in life that hopefully we all learn at some point. It's not about me. We matter and we don't, right? Like I have to believe that I matter in order to believe that somebody else matters. And at the same time, I don't matter enough for this whole entire life and world and all of humanity and history to be revolved around me. So there's this fine balance of self-love and other love, of self-care and other care. And this is my attempt to take something really grand and big and to just put it in something a little smaller, a little more palpable, a little more, you don't even know what's happening because you just think you're listening to a podcast. But lo and behold, wheels are turning, gears are shifting, and we're finding new ways to look at the world. And so I'm not saying I have all of that to offer, but I have a lot of friends and a lot of people that I've met throughout life that have a lot of insight and a lot of wisdom or just a lot of life experience or humor or whatever it is they have to offer. They have much of it. And I think that can add to this greater experience of connectedness and there being so much more to life than we ever thought. So we're going to get to the gist of it through the jest of it. The gist and the jest. Why the title? When I started doing stand-up comedy, I was already a storyteller. I know a lot of people have a problem with that term, especially as a profession. What's a storyteller? Don't say storyteller. We're all storytellers in one way or another, but I had been public speaking, if you want an official term, for over 10 years. I have my own story of recovery, of addiction, of loss, of grief in many different areas, some of which I've touched on publicly and some of which I haven't, whether it's because in some ways I still am sorting through them or in other ways that's just between me and God, and it's a beautiful thing that we have. I'm still learning the line between sharing my story for empowerment and to help other people, but not exploiting those that it involves or turning it into a pity party or a love fest just for me to feel better about the things that I've been through, because I don't think it's about that. So I say that to say I've been storytelling for a long time, but when you enter the world of comedy, there's this, I don't even know what the word is, unspoken understanding or unspoken set of rules in which you have to suffer for a certain amount of time before you're even taken seriously as a comedian. You have to bomb for 20 years before you're considered good. You have to have done a number of crappy shows and hole in the wall bars before you're given a shot on stage somewhere that matters. Because in the comedy world, that's a thing, you know, a certain audience matters, a certain stage matters. Even that I had a hard time with, coming from a place of believing that each person in the seat mattered, and it mattered what they came to hear me say, and what might go over everyone else's head might hit one person straight to the heart. And that might be the point of why I was there that night, right? And so comedy was a very different arena for me to enter, because all of a sudden I was put in a place where I was constantly told that it was no longer really about the audience. It is, obviously you require them, but you got to get your own, and you got to get your laughs, and you got to earn your time, and you got to pay your dues. And it becomes really self-absorbed really fast. And even though at first it was super fun because I thought I was just telling stories in a funny way on stage, I quickly got introduced to the bitterness and the resentfulness and the competitiveness of the comedy industry that I never set out to be a part of. I never set out to be some famous stand-up comedian. I was going through a really hard season of life, and I found an outlet in which to express myself. And for me, that just happened to be comedy, but I didn't know it was already this dynasty, for lack of a better word, in which you had to earn your stripes. I really just thought it was people finding ways to help themselves by expressing themselves and help other people by offering humor and laughter. And in some ways, yeah, I was super naive. I get it. I see the world. I think some people see me as this doughy-eyed, oh, wow, everything's just beautiful. But it's not because I just blindly walk around. I've been through the pitfalls, and I've seen the dark, and I choose the light instead. And that doesn't come easy, but it's a choice that I consistently try to make. And so, yeah, it was a naive thought, but at the same time, it was banking on the goodness and humanity for comedy to really be a tool that could be used to reach people in a really powerful way, that it didn't have to be about us as the comedians. I mean, what an honor for us to get to be the ones to use that tool, but it wasn't about us. And because I wasn't as firm-footed, not only in the industry, but still in myself and in my views and in the life in the world, it was still very new to me to choose this perspective of the goodness and humanity, the goodness of God, universe, whatever you want to call it, him, she, this greater than myself force that really it's all about and that's orchestrating all that is life. We just get to take a part in it. I was constantly told to just say yes to whatever show you can get. Just say yes all the time, no matter what it is, whether it's just to get stage time or whether it's just to get a paycheck. You just do it. You just show up and you just do it. And people who play sports or athletics, they could probably relate, right? You just show up, you just do it. You just put in the practice, you put in the time, you work it, you work out that muscle. And there's a truth to that. I think that's a truth that's easier applied to things like athletics because it's the game that you're perfecting, right? With comedy, though, it's interesting. Yes, there is a muscle that you have to work out. There's a confidence you have to gain, and that comes from stage time and doing the work and showing up. And at the same time, you're becoming the voice, the face of your message. And your message can very easily get shaped by the audience you're in front of instead of what it is you truly believe in your core for it to be about. So like, let's say you're getting a specific type of audience that is giving you attention and it's growing and it's growing and it's growing. You're going to keep doing whatever that audience likes or whatever that audience wants, just so that you get the attention and the accolades and that you get to be greater and greater and more of a success and more stage time and more this and more that. But if that in any way, shape, or form derailed from your original message or original intention, but that just wasn't getting enough attention, by the time you're some great whatever, you've lost whatever it was you wanted to say to begin with. Whatever it was you wanted to connect with people over, whatever it was you wanted to be about, the audience created you. So there's this balance between, yes, you show up and you do the work, but also you learn when to say no. You learn when it's not just about the money. You learn when it's okay to do something that seems absurd in the eyes of, for lack of a better word, the world, Hollywood, whatever the success thing is. But to you, it just feels right to not take part in it, or it feels wrong to not take part in it. Whatever it is for anybody, everyone's cause and case is different. I'm not here to preach a cause, but I do think who you are as an individual, what you're putting out in the world, if you feel convicted about that, to give that up for the sake of the attention and the appraisal of the audience, you will end up like every other person in Hollywood who has said they got everything they ever wanted and they're completely miserable. I've always known I never wanted to end up like that, but getting caught up in this comedy world, especially by accident, I just kept doing what I was told was supposed to be what you do. Before I knew it, people were really building my brand. I didn't have a brand. People were building my brand. Even some of the groups I got involved in, I don't know how much I meant to get involved in them so much as I was just taking the advice of you just keep doing everything. And so I just kept consistently doing whatever came my way, even if it felt off or if it, I don't know if wrong is the right word, but something about it didn't rub right with me. And I'm not saying I'm far enough into the business to have all of this wisdom or advice. But I will say, I don't know how much I care about the business. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I mean that in a genuine way where it's not just business for me. Kudos to those of you who it is just business for you. This is literally just your job. I'm not going to shame you. I'm in the same way that I wouldn't shame somebody to show up at their job for the bank or whatever it is. If that's what this is for you, that's great. That's very much a thing. But I'm not going to do that at the expense of me not being true to who I am. I don't need to be somebody else just to get a door to open for me. I care much more about depth than I do width. I care more about an audience that is going to respond to honesty and vulnerability, even if that comes in the form of humor. I'm not saying you have to go sit in some love sappy conference all the time. And while I do think there's a time and a place to solely just be entertained, I also think it's beautiful when that entertainment can be mixed with deeper meaning and questions. So here I am now, not even really sure if the term comedian is what I want to go by, but still very much this storyteller that I've always been. I think I have a voice that matters. I think that I'm a strong, capable human being of showing up in the world, regardless of what her industry is or her title is, or even the expectations placed on her by other people. Because I believe that for myself, I believe it for other people. And I want other people to become more of who they were created to be. Not more of what Instagram wants to see more of, not more of what Hollywood wants to produce. I want people to be okay being themselves, be confident in who they are, and showing up not to prove the world wrong, not to come from a stance of, well, this is me, I don't care about you, to genuinely just love themselves into a place of peaceful existence and acceptance of other people as they are. So this is I don't know if I'm going to keep doing comedy, but I'm definitely going to keep telling stories. Maybe they'll come in the form of comedy shows, but maybe not. So I'm doing a podcast to share more of my own personal stories that you don't really get to share on stage because you always have to get to a punchline, and that kind of stops you short of getting to the good part, the meat, so to speak. And I don't want it to just be all about me. I wanted to create a space where we can all share our stories, where we can all show up as ourselves. So there's no formula for what story they tell or how they tell it. I tell them I'm not going to feed you a script. I'm not going to give you a way in which it needs to be presented. I want you to show up as yourself, and I want you to tell it as yourself. So whether if that's recited from memory, whether it's reading it off a page, I want you to tell it as you, and you get to pick. If you want to give a, brief summary of your life experiences and your life overall up to this point, go for it. If you have a certain life event that occurred that means something to you, share that. If you are just a storyteller or a writer and you wrote maybe a piece of nonfiction, but it's something that holds value to you that you think is meaningful to the world, share that. So that's how the podcast is going to start. It's going to start with the person sharing their story. I think that's what we need, to listen to other people's stories. And especially with all that's going on in the world right now, I think we need to listen first, ask questions later. And so that's what I want to do. And I'm going to live that out by listening first, letting them share first, and then we talk. Then we have a conversation. I ask them questions about their stories or questions about where they're at now, and we just talk. And to me, it's just a layout. For lack of a better word, it's a formula for how I think we should function in life. Just listening first, asking questions later. And some of them talk about really intense stuff. Some of them talk about heavy stuff. Some of them talk about growing up in poverty, growing up in a third world country. Some of them talk about racial injustice. Some of them talk about depression, anxiety. Some of them talk about losing an iPad or having kids. The door is wide open for the topics, and they can take it where they want to take it. I'm here to listen and to just be a part of whatever space they want to take up in the world and sharing the story that they have. And then at some point, no matter how hard the topic was that they talked about, we will talk about, no matter how hard life gets, where do you find the goodness in it? Where do you find humor? How do you get humor out of pain? And getting to the gist of their story will find the jest in life, because I think there has to be a mix. I think there has to be a mix of awareness of the struggle, awareness of the pain, awareness of others. And I think there has to be laughter and a lightheartedness and an ability to just let go of the argument, to let go of the debate, to stop trying to convince everybody else that you're right and they're wrong, and vice versa. Let it go. Relax. Just laugh. Even if it's at yourself, which, believe me, a lot of us need more of that, because I do think laughter is medicine in the midst of a very painful world. But I think you have to acknowledge the pain in order to take the medicine. So that's the gist of it. This is basically the introduction to season 1. And starting next week, we'll have our first episode. Really excited for that. Scattered throughout every week of other people sharing their stories. I'm going to take a week here and there to share some of my stories and to check in with you guys. So it'll be a mix. It'll be interesting. It'll be fun. I don't yet have a sponsor for the podcast. You often hear about sponsors, people thanking their sponsors. The benefit of that is you're not going to hear any crummy commercials from me, especially ones I don't believe in. The only sponsor that we have for this podcast is, well, let's see. I do art, so I sell art. You're more than welcome to check out my art page. I'll put it in the notes. Hopefully you can just click on it or look it up. I also wrote a book, which I mentioned earlier. It's called A Spade. Again, it's a collection of stories that were a little hard for me to tell, having grown up in the background that I did, but finding the freedom to tell them without airing everybody else's dirty laundry. That was quite a challenge. What else? Oh, I have a Dry Bar comedy special. You can check that out. Every download, every like, every time you share it with somebody or just watch it, you can watch it for free on their app. But every time you download the app or share my link with somebody, and that's super helpful to me as a comedian. Well, I don't know what I am. As a kind of funny person, that's my new thing. Amongst the many things I do, sometimes I'm funny, but it absolutely helps me out, especially in this post-COVID world. And it would continue to help me with doing this podcast and with sharing other people. So for now, that's our sponsors. That's my Chromie commercial, my art, my book, my comedy. Thanks to everyone who watched my shows during quarantine. I did a Stay and Saturday show every Saturday, which was actually super fun. A lot of work. I got to a point where I just kind of needed a breather, and with everything going on in the world, which we will touch on in future episodes. So I'm excited about that. That was when I kind of had a moment of realizing, wow, I need to listen more before I just keep cranking out my views and my thoughts in the form of this humorous video show on Saturdays. But it was super fun, and that can still be found on YouTube, youtube.com/JJ Barrows. So thanks so much for those of you who are present and who are here. And some of you have just been, I don't know if advocate is the word, but you've really been huge supports to me. So I do want to create this little space and time to just say thank you. Hey, this is going to be a fun journey. Bear with us in the beginning as we work through audio issues and everything, especially in the early stages. Man, grace, grace, grace. We'll see you next week. I'm excited.